Well, I say let's get this party started. And I'm going to do an introduction about why we're gathered and why it matters. So, I'm Sandy. I'm the director of the Pink Lady Posse. And that's because every woman needs a posse,
Mhm.
and every woman wants to be healthy.
Should I
Every
feel
woman
threatened by that comment?
do what? Yeah.
Should
And
I feel threatened by that comment? The
look,
female posse?
I think you should tell me. I think you're up for it.
Okay, all right.
So we have sort of five angles in the Pink Lady Posse, and that is being connected helps you stay alive. And people who aren't connected, it's disastrous for their life. Isolation and loneliness are not good for you. And there's cool people like this to me. There's no reason why you would be. And then health matters because if you're not feeling good, that has an impact on you. And women our age, between 50 and 90, 100, whatever, go through 5 to 7 major transformations and transition times.
Hmm.
And those times need support. They need constant companionship. And we have supportive programs for that called liminal space and how to navigate in the in between. So we have that. And then we also have creativity times together. And we basically, I say fun is our special sauce, right? I mean, if you're going to live longer, feel better, be happier, you might as well do it with a posse. So, one of those features, Diana and I have known each other for a long, long time. And back in, I think I knew her in the 90s. Hey, Amy, she was a news reporter for health and wellness and aging back in the 70s when she was a granola, what they call you, a health nut?
Yeah, a health nut.
Yeah. So she's been a health nut a long time, and she's always the one saying, "Hey, have you heard of this modality? Have you started red light therapy? Do you know what nitric oxide is? Have you got your blah, blah, blah?" And I'm like, "Hey, look, you know all that. You should be the one sharing what you know." So she's not our teacher, but she's our sort of our evangelist on living well longer. And I'm going to tell you, she's 82 years old because she may or may not, but she's I'm following the leader on that. So I'm going to let her take over, but I want to just tell you how much we appreciate you, Dr. Chinn. When when I first heard of nitric oxide, I was like, "Well, that sounds toxic." I mean, I didn't even want to, I never heard of it. How can I be 60 years old and never heard of it? If it's so important, why is it such a mystery? So, Diana and Dr. Chinn are going to continue the conversation, and I know you will learn something, and it's being recorded. And because you registered, you'll get a copy of the recording. And so, I'm going to just say, take it away, Diana and Dr. Chinn, and we're all ready to learn something.
Okay, well, I have to tell Dr. Chinn, when we did this program, basically we started off with longevity, and longevity is the going word right now. You see it everywhere. We don't say anti-aging any longer. We say age reversal, because we're not against aging, because we don't like the alternative, but we are against healthy living and living longer. And so I had my book, my handy book here, Dr. Chinn's book, and I showed everyone, everybody's got to have this book. And I remember whenever we were talking before about um, nitric oxide, he was just so informative. And I've asked several people when we were getting ready, to talk about nitric oxide, what they knew about it. And people didn't know anything about it. I was surprised at the number of people that do not know about nitric oxide. So, Dr. Chinn, I'm going to let you start off by telling everyone what is nitric oxide and why do we need to know?
Uh, okay. Sandy and or Diana D, do you want me to explain in a nutshell who I am and where I come from? Or is that
Absolutely. Yes.
oh,
I would
uh,
love for you to do it because you know more about you than I do, and what I might say might not be the most important thing. So, take it away.
um I have the privilege next 2 months of becoming Medicare available. That's hard for me to believe, but so I've been in practice for almost 40 years. Went to Life Chiropractic College down in Atlanta, Georgia. And of course, becoming a chiropractor, a long story from an injury in the logging industry, but chiropractic helped me, and I thought, hey, this is cool. I can help people and not maybe not get killed every other day. Um, so almost 40 years in practice. Obviously, as a chiropractor, I lean more towards a holistic understanding of wellness and how to regain it and maintain it. And about, oh gosh, 15 or 20 years ago, I'd have to nail down the exact date. I ran into a gentleman who was excited about a nutritional company that was formulating and promoting nutritional products that promoted the production of nitric oxide. And like most everybody, I had not heard of that before. Didn't know what it was or why I needed it or why I should even waste my time on it. But quickly discovered that nitric oxide, since the Nobel Prize in the early 90s, was awarded to the three scientists who basically brought it to the forefront, um, that it was the not only very important, but it is considered and has been labeled the most important signaling molecule in human physiology, period, hands down. In other words, just about every physiological function, whether it's at the very beginning of human life, when that sperm cell it gets attracted to and shakes hands with that ovum, it's the nitric oxide molecule that then tells the other guy to say, "Hey, you're all out of the race," and basically, you know, um, from that to nerve function to obviously cardiovascular function, which we'll deep dive into, I'm sure, on this little talk. It's the most important signaling molecule ever discovered. And to back up what you had said a minute ago, Sandy, about not many people know about it, and you didn't know about it. I had a lady come into my office about 12 years ago and wanted to sell me a piece of diagnostic equipment that usually is found in a hospital, but me being interested in endothelial function and its dysfunction, wanted to have a better way of having a metric or a measurement of how resilient a person is or how weak they are in the production of nitric oxide. And she hooked herself up to this machine to demonstrate this machine, and it was a pulse wave device measuring how easily the blood vessels can dilate and constrict based on physiological demands of the body. And uh, I said, well, this must have obviously a lot of applications for in nitric oxide, endothelial dysfunction and nitric oxide availability. And she kind of looked at me with a deer in the headlights stare, and I said, "You're familiar with nitric oxide?" And she went like this. She was a 30 plus year neonatal surgical nurse, actually ran neonatal the NICU facilities in these big hospitals and worked in areas that had a tremendous amount to do with cardiovascular physiology. And she didn't really know what it was. And I said, hang on just a minute. Went into the other room and grabbed some of the product that I helped formulate and mixed a little up and gave it to her, and she downed it. And about 10 minutes later in our discussion, her eyes started to get really big, and she looked at the monitor that she had hooked herself up to, and she says, "Is that because of what I just took?" And I just kind of nodded, and it absolutely blew her socks off that something from a nutritional standpoint could impact a a clinical diagnostic monitor that quickly and to that degree.
Hmm.
But what it showed me, and the point of this story, and I apologize for going on too long on it, but the point being, here's somebody in the top of their field in 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 functional medicine, allopathic medicine having to do specifically with cardiovascular physiology, absolutely clueless. And that's, and that was 10, 12 years ago. And I don't know if it's really moved that far forward from that. Diana, you might have a better answer for that, but there's still a lot of confusion and downright ignorance when it comes to what nitric oxide is, how important it is for everyone, and especially I'm getting on a plane in a couple weeks to go give a module at in Wisconsin on geriatric physiology, especially with chiropractic applications. Um, but especially in light of our aging population, us, I am at the very tail end. I'm the youngest of the boomers, but all my friends are becoming Medicare eligible, and I'm losing friends. I lost a good friend across the Canadian border just a few weeks ago to a stroke. Um, but uh, being able to enlighten people as to the importance of it, especially having to do with things that we have control of, our diet, what we eat, etc., is priceless.
I did ask my chiropractor after I'd read your book. And so just testing him, I said, what would you recommend to increase nitric oxide? And he said, he thought about it for a minute. He said, beet juice. And of course, I've read that, beet juice is one of the things, beet juice, that does increase it. But hopefully the word is getting out. I'm seeing it more and more, different forms. The tablets that
Yeah.
you put under your tongue. L-arginine, I have a needlephobia, and the reason is because they have a hard time finding my vein. And they've tried everything, including putting a heating pad, on my arm so they can find the vein. And I have learned that if I'll take L-arginine about 30 minutes before I go to have blood work done, well, it opens up my blood vessel enough, and they never have an issue following or finding it.
And that was a response. At least he knew something about it, and that's excellent. And of course, the beetroot, the nitrates in the beetroot powder, the beetroot juice, that was the substance that was used in the original lab work, which led to then eventually the writings of the paper and the submissions to the Nobel Prize Committee. So that goes way back, which is interesting because then it became L-arginine, which hit all the news and everybody was talking about L-arginine, but the beetroot is the other pathway. It's the nitrate pathway, the oral mucosa pathway, the supplemental, which actually I was just reviewing a paper from the Journal of Geriatric Cardiology that was published in 2011. Just incredible, very very intense from from the wording of it and big words, but the the oral pathway, and we'll probably discuss that more later, the two pathways, but the oral pathway having to do with the bacteria that assist us in a symbiotic relationship to be able to extract the nitrate from the plants and then turn it to nitrate, which turns it into nitric oxide, is as old. No, it's infinitely older than we as human beings are.
Mhm.
That started in early bacteria, that pathway. And then actually, then the redundant pathway of the citrulline and the L-arginine, that actually became more of the secondary redundant pathway. So we've kind of had it a little bit backwards on that. I thought that was interesting.
Can I
We're
jump in
hearing
just a
more.
second? I just want to make sure that I understand what you've said so far.
Good.
Nitric oxide is often not known. It affects our blood flow. It affects, I mean, I really think it affects our brain, it affects our organs, it affects everything. And there's two different pathways that we'll talk about. And it's not just good to know, it's actually life-saving. Would you say that?
Oh, absolutely. Without nitric oxide, we would cease to exist.
Okay.
Period. Instantly. Instantly. In fact, speaking of instantly, the half-life, it's a valent molecule. In other words, it wants to trade and borrow and attract electrons, and that's why it's a signaling molecule. It's because it has that valent charge. It's not electrically neutral. It's NO minus. So it's active. It wants to find a methyl group. It wants to find a hydrogen to balance that negative charge, and that's why it runs around and becomes this signaler, is because it's so bioactive like that. Um, the point I want to make really quick is you cannot, and if you hear somebody say this as you become more of an understanding of the physiology of it, you can't take nitric oxide. I hear people all the time, oh, I need to take more nitric oxide. I need to. No, 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 no. Nitric oxide lasts less than a second. Once it's formed, it lasts less than a second. It dissipates, it's gone. So you have to have a pool of the substrates available that when the physiological demand asks for it, boom, that healthy endothelium, that healthy bacteria in your mouth breaking the nitrate to the nitrite. And then when it hits the acid of the stomach, it blossoms into the nitric oxide and instantly, does what it needs to do. Um, it's all about having the nutritional foundation, which gives the availability of the substrates that when on demand it's there. So it's like now that we're going to have some really serious problems with our auto industry right now because of these tariffs and all these other things. Well, the auto industry has evolved and developed into an industry that is almost entirely on demand. They don't have a big warehouse with all these parts or whatever. When they need, these are continually replenished from Mexico, from Canada, or whatever, and okay, that's as far as I'll go with that. But I'm trying to give you a picture of no, it's not like the body has this room over here with a key and a bunch of nitric oxide on shelves that it can just dish out when it needs to. It doesn't work that way. And we have to have a balance of physiology. We have to have a nutritional foundation and in conjunction with having the correct environment where the scavengers, the free radicals that want to come and steal that nitric oxide and attach it to something else and scurry it away. So it's having that balance of the availability of the substrates of nitric oxide and also making sure that we're not eating a high inflammatory diet, which is spinning off all these free radicals that cannibalize the nitric oxide that maybe our struggling endothelium is trying to produce. And I apologize if I'm getting ahead of myself here.
Very interesting. Dr. Chinn, we're hearing more and more every day. Maybe it's my age, but a lot of younger people, younger than I am, that are having early onset dementia.
I just read an article 5 minutes ago about dementia and nitric oxide. Reread it.
Okay, so that was my question. Is the dementia, Alzheimer's, is that something that the nitric oxide could alleviate?
There is excuse me 1 second while I refresh my memory on that. There it is. So there's in the development of dementia, especially Alzheimer's, there's an alpha beta molecule, these amyloid peptides which can accumulate and basically end up deactivating the neurons of our nervous system. And it's the nitric oxide, a healthy nitric oxide balance is essential at diminishing the ability of these alpha beta peptides to create what they call plaquing on these neurons, which is basically a degeneration of the surface of these neurons. And it is, I can send you that article if you want. It's very interesting.
Yeah, that would be great.
But in the conclusion of the article, it's the same as almost anything having to do with nitric oxide physiology. They put out a disclaimer there. In other words, there needs to be a tremendous amount of more study and looking into exactly what the pathway is and how that relates to functional medicine and behavioral nutrition and et cetera, and how we can preemptively um, either delay or even prevent the development of all these forms of dementia.
Is there a way you can test nitric oxide?
It's almost you can't see the wind, but you can see what the wind is doing. And that just popped into my head, and it seems that's a good analogy. You really can't test for nitric oxide. Like I said, it's almost instantaneously appears, does its job and disappears. But you can test the effects of the nitric oxide, the wind, based on what the resilience, the flexibility, the contractility of the blood vessels that it's affecting, the nerves that it's affecting. One of the best ways, the gold standard of testing for whether you have proper levels of at least the substrates for the production of nitric oxide, and therefore the healthy effects of it, is what's called FMD, or flow mediated dilatation, which is basically it looks like a blood pressure device, a blood pressure cuff, but it's measuring the ability, the resilience of the dilatation of blood vessels. There's the one I like, that and I'll grab it here real quick.
And you see why we love Dr. Chinn. He's so willing to answer our crazy questions.
Yeah.
Have you seen one of these?
Yeah.
Yes.
So these are all almost, this is the iHeart model, iHeart brand. You can, as a consumer, as a layperson, you can order one of these and use it as a monitor. And it's a multifunctional device. It's not only, it's measuring pulse oximetry. In other words, the oxygen level via, it shoots a red light through your skin, and then the algorithms crunch the numbers, and it gives you a percentage of percent of oxygen. Mine usually is at 95, 96, 97%, which most humans, healthy
So
humans.
most docs, I go to a functional doctor, and now they take your blood pressure, they weigh you, they also put that on your finger. And mine's usually 97, 98. Does that
Yeah.
mean I'm
Yeah,
in good shape?
no, that's good. Yeah, and that's normal. 95 to 98 is typical range. But what this is also a pulse wave device. Are you familiar with that, Diana? Sandy?
I'm not sure.
I'm
Okay.
not.
Pulse wave uses the same physical accessing the data, and then um, using computer algorithms. It gives basically an assessment of the health of your cardiovascular system. And from the lay person reading, it basically gives you a quote unquote internal age. So if you're 82, but
Yes.
your endothelial is functioning well. Your oral route, the nitrite route is functioning well. Um, your internal age might be 56. In other words, the resilience, the elasticity of your blood vessels is healthier and more like a 56-year-old person than an 82-year-old person because of behavioral modification, what you eat, what you supplement with, de-stressing your environment, avoiding the free radicals, scavengers, by different, by utilizing antioxidants, etc. This little device costs you a couple $100 to access the membership. It's 100 or 150. Can't remember. You'd have to look it up at iheart.com. But is a really good to create a baseline to see where you're at. It's not so much, oh, I did the test once, I'm good or I'm bad or whatever. No, it's create a baseline, check it every 30 days or whatever to see what your trend is. This little device replaced the test that they used to do, where they take you into the cardiac surgical unit of a hospital with a big team standing around in case you're arrested. And it was a highly invasive test, but with the development of this device, they were able to emulate that gold standard test that was highly invasive and highly risky with this little doodad, and up to 97, 98% um, accuracy of the hospital-based test. So I'll, since we're on that subject, I'll bring up the question that Sandy put on the question list of, are the nitric oxide strips helpful? Are they accurate? I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe a 5. In other words, that strip is taking a snapshot of a very dynamic process. It is not aware of the free radical environment. It's not aware of what antioxidants you're taking. It's uh, I made a note here. Uh,
Just to explain why I had that
yeah.
question, my girlfriend, I asked her, "Are you doing anything to generate nitric oxide in your body?" "Oh, I did one of those strips. I put it in my mouth and it said I'm fine." I'm like, "So you're
Well,
not going to be
that
focused on nitric oxide because one strip one day said you're fine? That doesn't sound right to me."
that's like going in. That's like having a family history of high blood pressure, which me, and going in getting your blood pressure checked, but you happen to have a pretty calm day and and your spouse is treating you good that day or whatever. And for whatever reason, your body is resilient and adaptive enough that you have a good reading. That is a snapshot that really doesn't have much to do with the dynamics of, of your life. And those strips are measuring salivary nitrite. Okay, so they're measuring the nitrite, which the bacteria have already interacted with. So they've reduced the nitrate to the nitrite. So that strip is measuring the nitrite and giving you a snapshot of, okay, is there nitrite available? However, is your stomach environment, the acid environment of your stomach, um, uh, optimal enough to be able to transfer that nitrite into the nitric oxide? Is it doesn't, that's, those strips don't measure endothelial function, so it's not measuring at all the redundant supplemental pathway that is helping check and balance and fill in the gaps of the oral pathway, which happens dynamically both ways, of course, right? Hence the redundancy aspect of that concept. So it's a piece of information, but I wouldn't rely on it solely by any means.
So mentioning high blood pressure, does nitric oxide help with high blood pressure?
So Hypertension was one of the primary focuses of the original research, um, because of the observed laboratory effect of proper endothelial function and proper availability for the production of nitric oxide, dilating the arteries and giving the walls of the arteries sufficient resilience to, high blood pressure is a lot of pressure going through a lumen or a tube, right? Okay. If you increase the volume capacity and elasticity of that constricted space, what happens to the pressure? Up or down? Goes down, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's in a simplistic model, that's the effect of nitric oxide is on demand when when the holistic mind, if you will, says that it's needed to relax the pressure, that nitric oxide's the delivery person for that effect. So yes, it has everything to do with hypertension. I'm a little bit type A. My wife would probably add a lot to that. Um, but my family history from my mom's side, not many males make it past 60 years of age. I've lost my little brother. My grandfather lost his legs through diabetes and then died of heart disease. Um, uh, you know, my mom's brothers, just strokes and heart attacks one after another. So there's a lot of family history of cardiovascular issues, hypertension included. And I had my flight medical doc about 12 years ago just look at me and shake his head. And because that was when I was formulating the nitric oxide products. And I was convinced that just exercise, diet, nitric oxide, precursor supplementation was sufficient to deal with this family history issue. And he just looked at me and shook his head. And he was a very holistically minded, he was a DO, very holistically minded, um, or at least moderately so. And he said, Perry, some people just have essential hypertension. Okay. and uh, and I will say, because of my high risk, I'll admit I still take 10 milligrams of lisinopril daily. I still do, just prophylactically. Because even with the nitric oxide, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you if it wasn't for nitric oxide and and what that has done in my understanding of it. But still, because of my genetic expression, the genes that I inherited from my parents, mostly my mom, thank you. Um, I just have essential hypertension and I have to be mindful of that. So that brings up a very important point. There are times for allopathic intervention. There really are. What we can strive for is doing the best we can, eating the best we can, supplementing the best we can, exercising the best we can, but still we need somebody on our healthcare team to watch out for the what ifs, the things that we have no control over.
Do you think that red light therapy has any effect where nitric oxide is concerned?
I've heard that it has and can. I'm not as knowledgeable about the red light as a lot of people are, or other people are. So I've still got a lot of research and knowledge to gain on that one. But I would say yes.
Well, can I just ask another question, Diana?
Sure.
You mentioned diabetes. Like, how does nitric oxide and diabetes correlate with one another?
Depending on your genetic expression, And I'll put in a little plug right now for epigenetic profiling testing. I highly recommend that. If you're not familiar with it, they used to think that genetically what we receive from our mom, what we receive from our dad, that was written in stone, and we were the product of that, nothing we could do about it. With epigenetic, with an understanding of epigenetics, we realize that our environment, our behavior, our diet, our consciousness, our whether we explode with four-letter words every 3 seconds, or we're as resilient as and calm as Gandhi or Mother Teresa. All those have a tremendous influence
Is it?
on how we express the many thousands of genetic alleles we have. There's you can do epigenetic testing where it's just a mouth swab and it's a DNA test, and they test for the one company I use about 700 different genetic alleles, and then it gives you a report based on what your SNPs are. SNP, SN as in November, SNP, single nucleotide polymorphism. What that is our unique, like our fingerprint, our unique genetic imprint based on what we got from our parents and their parents and back up the line. Um, we have a tendency, I mentioned I lost my little brother. I talked to the coroner. She said he died of heart and liver failure, secondary to ethanol poisoning. And I knew he liked to drink, but I didn't think he was a falling down drunk. But when I went to a seminar 10 years or so ago, just went to a seminar. I needed CE hours. It had to do with genetics. And I thought, oh, okay, this is something I don't know a lot about. Within 10 minutes, my jaw had hit the floor. I realized that's why I lost my little brother. This is why I'm having issues with this or whatever. In other words, my brother had a SNP, or a single nucleotide polymorphism. In other words, morphism meaning structure or development of poly meaning multi, or anyway, how his genetics were expressed, he was unable to uh, to break the ethanol in ingestible alcohol down to the aldehydes, which then the liver could then metabolize and properly excrete and detoxify. He was deficient in that enzyme step. And I realized that I share that. I'm a lightweight. I'm not a beer drinker. I really don't like hard alcohol, but I do like the ciders, but one at a time, maybe three a week. That's it. I'm a cheap date when it comes to that. And that's because physiologically, I can't handle it. I can't process it. And what underscores that is losing my little brother, Dr. Greg, a chiropractor, a Gonstead chiropractor just like me, followed my footsteps, and he died. He didn't even make it to 51. So knowing that testing is invaluable. So then you can see, oh, in my blood sugar pathway, speaking of diabetes, I've got this gene SNP here, which means I don't, I'm not able to XYZ. Or in the dopamine serotonin pathway. I've got this gene SNP here. So therefore I have to watch out about my road rage and depression or moods or whatever else. Or, I've got it here in the Krebs cycle, or I've got it over here in the nitric oxide pathway. Hello. So we may genetically not be able to physiologically produce and process and store the reserves for the nitric oxide pathway as the person sitting next to you. And you don't know that unless you've had the testing done. So I think it's one of the basic metrics of physiology, if you're seeing a functional medicine practitioner, is to have a genetic profile done, find out where you're at, and it gives you a report at the end. It's fairly exhaustive or in depth, where it shows red, yellow, green. Green means you have inherited no tendency from either parent to express this issue. So don't worry about it. Yellow means it's a heterozygous trait. You got it from one of your parents based on your behavior, your diet, your nutrition. You may express this issue. So heads up, watch out. If it's red, that means you got it from both, you got the trait. It's like ending up with red hair, and neither of your parents are redheaded, but it was a recessive gene. And just boom, boom, two recessive genes hit together and you've got red hair. So if it's red, that means the homozygous you got from both your parents. You're very likely to express it based on your environment, based on what you're eating, what you're ingesting, the toxicity of your environment, on and on and on. So diabetes, getting back to that. Yes, so one of the most debilitating sequelae or effects of chronic type 2 diabetes are cardiovascular issues. People lose their limbs, their legs, like my grandfather did because of that. So the ability for your cardiovascular system to carry the nutrients, carry the oxygen, remove metabolites, remove toxicity and everything else based on the patency of your cardiovascular system, especially the ones further removed from your heart, those little tiny capillaries and arterioles that are, and that's why people lose their extremities, their feet and their legs first, is because it's so far away and has become so stagnated. Yeah. That the necrosis sets in and the limb dies. So nitric oxide is a huge part of that. There and again, just like the dementia, the Alzheimer's, the effects of nitric oxide with those issues, a lot more in-depth study needs to be done on the correlations there clinically.
I have considered getting that genetic test. I hear Gary Brecka talking about it a lot, but I don't know. I'm not sure where to go to
Okay,
get that genetic test.
write this down. My Happy Genes, GENES, no spaces, .com. Dr. J, just the initial J, Dunn. She's a female. J Dunn, Dunn, out of Florida. She contributes all the context support. Anyway, she's the person who gives the seminars and everything on that. This is her entity of genetic testing. She uses a lab out of Kentucky or Tennessee or somewhere down there. And that's where the lab work's done. But that website will give you a tremendous amount of information, and just connect with her team, or she might connect with you personally. Just send an email and ask your questions. She's the brilliant star on that subject.
Okay, well, back to nitric oxide.
Yes.
Asking you, what is the best way to consume nitric oxide? Is it supplements, diet, exercise,
Yes.
red light therapy?
Yes.
All of those?
As I'm getting less young, more bald, more gray haired, and I don't want to step on any toes at all, but as I've experienced and observed some of the shenanigans of the network marketing industry, that being said, some of the best ways to obtain some of the only ways to obtain some of these supplements are through a reputable multi-level marketing or network marketing company. As I'm getting older, and my kids, I guess, I'm inheriting this from my kids, maybe reverse genetics. Our oldest, my wife's oldest daughter, my oldest stepdaughter, and her husband live just 5 miles away from us here in Montana. And she inherited from her grandfather the family homestead that that her grandfather and her great grandfather dynamited the stumps out of 100 years ago. Um, and that place now is row after row of greenhouse tunnels. They provide most of the organic produce for this whole section of Montana. And they're just awesome kids. They're dedicated to it. And uh, I say that because
Mhm.
the more I understand becoming even more respectful of the miracle that we call human life and understanding human physiology, uh, the best the best way to get the substrates is through your mouth in digestible form.
Hmm.
Uh, that that being said, a high quality nitric oxide precursor product can assist with that. But the default mechanism is whole food, in my opinion. And there's some people have issues with the arginine as far as the digestibility of it. So that can be problematic depending on, again, your genetic expression on how well you can, how your intestines can accommodate and deal with and absorb and properly mediate the arginine and citrulline products. The nitrates, definitely, I think, probably are the more valuable place to put your attention because of um, just the digestibility of it and the bioavailability of it, whether it's beetroot powder or whether it's taking a good high quality supplement product.
Hmm.
And definitely eating real food. And I've said this to people in my health talks for decades now. Um, Eat what your grandmother would recognize. Try to eat in the age of Costco. This is hard to do sometimes. Try to eat within 50 to 75 miles of where you live. In other words,
Hmm.
is that food local to you?
Mhm.
You know, and if not, it's not just an issue that's non-local, but if there's an issue of how they had to modify that product to whatever degree to be able to truck it 5,000 miles and store it for 10 months before it got to your plate. And there's a huge degradation in bioavailability when that happens. And that's a whole nother subject.
Can I jump in for a minute?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, my friend, when um, Diana's a big juicing advocate, and my friend and Diana both have me on a potential juicing path that I'm starting. So the nutrients are there. The nitric oxide helps the nutrients get to where they're going. And then you mentioned there are some respectful companies that have nitric oxide precursors.
And you know that probably better than I do at this point because I have been
I know.
I have been in the background for a few years now.
Well,
So
what I was going to say is one of those companies that you know and I know and have known, I got familiar with them because I had migraine headaches. And my
Mm.
friend said, you should do these drops under your tongue. And I'm like, what is that? Well, it's going on 14 years and I have not been without this product.
which product?
Well, it used to be called Kyani, Nitro FX
So
and Nitro Extreme, but
it was
now
the
it's
extreme.
it's
Yeah.
Amari.
But they're
I
still
mean,
are they still producing the same products?
they are.
And to your understanding, at the same quality, if not better?
They are.
Good.
And
That's
I
good to know.
brought
Okay.
for us today a discount, a $10 off discount to try either FX or Extreme. But I just want to say that on the only reason is because it's the only product I know. That doesn't mean it's the only product out there, but a lot of us do know that product. So if you're interested in trying Nitro FX or Nitro Extreme as a nitric oxide precursor that you put under your tongue, let it sit there, 3 times a day, a couple of drops. It will help whatever you're doing be better. But that's a different pathway. And
Yes.
I don't want to say a better pathway, but I think the older I get, the more available it is to me.
So-
Rather, go ahead, you take it from here because I don't know what I'm saying now.
Then that brings up the point that I think you wanted to address here. As we age, the efficiency of our endothelial system, the efficiency of even the alimentary route, the bacteria to the stomach acid route, uh, both of those systems degrade in efficiency significantly the less young we get, up to when you're into your late 70s and 80s, by as much as 75% of that functionality is gone. So that then it behooves us, I have to use that word once a month at least.
Behoove.
It behooves us then to not only eat good, real, locally available, organic, real food, and also utilize, like you say, the extreme or the Kyani or Amari products, but also be that much more aware and really be vigilant on not consuming the pro-inflammatory foods. That means most seed oils that people cook with and consume. That means most grain products that most people consume. Highly omega-6, linoleic acid, uh, pro-inflammatory. Huge. I can't stress that enough. So you have to not only increase the bioavailability of a good nutritious substrates, but you have to go to war on the cannibals, I guess is the way to put it. And that's the pro-inflammatory, high omega-6. Um, and understand omega-3, omega-6 is a balance. You don't want to get rid of omega-6. It's essential for life. But the ratio is the key. The ratio is the key. So it's moving it more towards the omega-3s. The more double bonds you put in those carbon chains, the better off you'll be. So if you want to be a real nerd and get into biochemistry and physiology, read up about double bonds versus the hydrogenated, where they take out that double bond, replace it with a single bond. Now you have this hydrogen group here that anyway, that's
I'm
another
to go.
another story. But
Well, Dr. Chinn, I don't want to run out of time, but one of the things I wanted to do, I want to quote from your book, and I do want to promote your book because I love it, and thank you for autographing it
I
for me.
need to print some more.
Yeah. Oh, you do? You're
I
good.
do.
Go tell me.
Yeah.
Well, I took this right out of your book. Nitrogen in the form of nitric oxide was labeled in 1992 as the molecule of life by Science magazine. It is now considered possibly the most important molecule in the body. So I'm going to tell everybody again, The Symphony of Wellness is Dr. Chinn's book. And of course, it talks about how nitric oxide can help you orchestrate your health. And it's highly recommended.
As we go through life, we're given gifts, and sometimes we recognize them, sometimes we don't. But I was reading earlier today, getting ready for this call. I was reading a little bit of the book, and I looked at it, and it's like, who wrote this? You know, um, it. I was so enthralled with the subject, and so much. I fell in love. I mean, Greg Braden. Have you heard of Greg Braden? Probably one of the most powerful authors about human consciousness. And anyway, he said something where his wife was involved with like the big Emmy award, some big awards for the music people, Grammy or whatever they were.
Dreamies.
And she was high in the administration of that. So he was alongside when they were giving all the awards and stuff. And he was able to talk to 10 or 12 or 15 of these really high profile artists, musicians. And he said, without exception, every one of them says, I don't know where the music came from. It just came through me.
Mm.
You know, just pure inspiration. And I was so caught up with the value of this information. I'm thankful that I was able to put some words to it. And it's really not me. It's higher than me. So.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure, Sandy, you have some closing remarks.
Well, I just want to close by saying the reason the Pink Lady Posse exists is women 50 to 90 have and older, maybe I'll live to 100. We have the choice over how our life goes. It's a creation of our own life. But if we assume that we're going to have illness and chronic illness and succumb to illness and live with the illness, then we're going to have illness. If there are people out there that are doing things that we might want to emulate, like juicing or exercise or nitric oxide or whatever it is, not having the information leaves you without the information. And then not having connection to one another, there's all kinds of reports that say 45% mortality rate is higher, 77% dementia likelihood. I'm like, we need each other. And so I just want to say, all of you have information to share. And Diana has been a gift to all of us to just bring health and wellness to the front. And, we love you, Dr. Chinn, and the conversation will keep going. It really means a lot that out of your world, you're retired, that you would come to our little meeting here so that
Well,
we can share it.
I need to thank you all because I tell you what, my passion for this subject will never diminish. And it puts me in a really good place to just be able to communicate it. And um, there's still a lot to learn. There's still a lot to understand.
Well, I put in the chat the two links for the product if you're interested in trying it. Diana and I are going to be here every Thursday at 3:00 for Health, Beauty, and Light. If you register, you get a copy of the recording and share it with your friends, get the information out, and by all means, be a member of the Pink Lady Posse. And our Health, Beauty, and Light closing comment is, for those who have their health, they have 1,000 wishes. For people who don't, they only have one. So thanks for being educated. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye, everybody. Enjoyed
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.